Jake Miller had long accepted the rhythm of his modest life, a routine built around double shifts and late nights spent mopping gym floors to keep a roof over his daughter Emily's head. Once a decorated veteran known for his discipline and courage on the battlefield, Jake now lived quietly, pushing through exhaustion for the sake of the little girl who was his entire world. At just 9 years old, Emily carried a smile bright enough to chase away the heaviness Jake often felt, and it was for her that he sacrificed everything: dreams, ambitions, even his health. The scars from combat ached each morning, but nothing compared to the thought of failing as a father. One particular evening, while pushing his mop across the gleaming floor of the downtown training facility, Jake noticed something unusual. The gym buzzed with energy, cameras flashed from every corner, and reporters huddled around the octagon like bees drawn to honey. At the center of the spectacle stood Ethan Cross, the billionaire CEO who had shocked the world by trading boardrooms for the cage. Ethan wasn't just a businessman, he was also an undefeated MMA champion whose fights were legendary. Jake paused his cleaning, sweat dripping down his brow, as their eyes briefly locked. Ethan nodded at him, almost as if acknowledging something unspoken. Later, when the media cleared, Ethan approached Jake with a directness that left no room for misinterpretation. "I know who you are, Miller," Ethan said firmly. "War hero, single dad, and a man who doesn't back down. I want you to step into the ring with me. A $10 million charity fight. You and me." Jake froze, his mop still in hand, his mind spinning at the absurdity of the offer. Why him? He hadn't sparred seriously in years, his body wasn't the same, and yet the thought of what that money could mean for Emily's future shook him to his core. College, security, a life without the constant worry of bills, suddenly it all felt possible. Though hesitation churned in his chest, he met Ethan's gaze with steady resolve. "If I do this," Jake murmured, "it won't be for me. It'll be for my little girl." Ethan's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Then that's exactly why you're the right man for the fight." The news spread like wildfire. An undefeated MMA champion and billionaire CEO had chosen to fight a janitor veteran. Media outlets mocked the idea, commentators called it a publicity stunt, and sports fans laughed at the thought of Jake Miller surviving even one round. But Jake wasn't concerned with their opinions. He wasn't fighting for fame, and he certainly wasn't fighting to prove anything to strangers. He was fighting for Emily, for the chance to give his daughter the stability she deserved. The first day of training nearly broke him. Years of combat had hardened him mentally, but his body protested against the grueling regimen. Old wounds flared, his knees buckled under pressure, and every strike against the heavy bag sent fire through his joints. Still, when Emily watched from the sidelines, clapping with her small hands and shouting, "Go, Daddy, you can do it," Jake found strength he didn't know he still had. Ethan Cross had given him access to top-tier coaches and state-of-the-art facilities, but Jake's drive came from something no trainer could teach. Each dawn run through the city streets, each hour spent in the gym, and every bead of sweat that dripped from his battered frame became a silent vow to Emily's future. His military discipline resurfaced, guiding him through every setback, reminding him that pain was temporary but purpose was permanent. Meanwhile, Ethan watched Jake's progress with growing respect. Unlike other opponents who sought victory for pride or profit, Jake was fueled by love. Ethan knew that kind of determination made a man dangerous, even in the cage. Nights were the hardest. After training, Jake would collapse into bed, bruised and aching, only to be woken by Emily gently placing a blanket over him. "You're my hero, Daddy," she whispered once, kissing his forehead. That simple phrase lit a fire deeper than any crowd's roar ever could. As the weeks passed, Jake's punches grew sharper, his footwork steadier, and his resolve unshakable. The world still doubted him, but in the quiet of the gym, under the watchful eyes of his daughter, Jake was becoming something no one expected: ready. The date of the fight loomed closer, and though fear lurked in his chest, his determination roared louder. He wasn't just stepping into the cage as a veteran or a janitor. He would step in as a father with everything on the line. Fight night arrived with an intensity Jake Miller had never experienced, not even in combat zones overseas. The stadium was alive with electricity, thousands of fans filling the seats while millions more watched on television. Commentators hyped Ethan Cross as the clear favorite, predicting an easy win for the Billionaire champion. Jake was introduced as the Underdog janitor, a label that made the crowd chuckle at first, but when he stepped into the cage, head held high, jaw set with determination, the laughter turned into curious silence. Across from him, Ethan stood tall, his muscles glistening under the bright lights, radiating confidence. When the bell rang, Ethan charged with precision, his strikes quick and calculated. Jake absorbed the hits, his body reeling under the pressure, but his military instincts kicked in. He studied Ethan, read his movements, and countered with steady jabs that surprised the crowd. By the second round, the whispers began, Jake wasn't falling. He wasn't just a punching bag. He was fighting back. Each time Ethan landed a blow, Jake staggered but refused to collapse. The pain was excruciating, yet with every glance at Emily cheering in the front row, Jake's resolve deepened. By the fourth round, something shifted. The audience, once skeptical, began chanting his name. The janitor, the veteran, the single dad. He had captured their hearts with his unyielding spirit. Sweat and blood streaked his face, his lungs burned, but he pressed on, landing a counterstrike that shook Ethan for the first time. The crowd erupted as the champion stumbled, and suddenly, the fight no longer looked one-sided. In the eighth round, Ethan unleashed a devastating hook that sent Jake crashing to the mat. Silence blanketed the stadium as the referee counted. 5. 6. Emily's desperate cry pierced the air, "Daddy, get up." And Jake's body responded. He rose, battered but unbroken, his eyes blazing with fire. Ethan stared at him, a flicker of respect flashing across his face, before the two clashed again. Jake's counterpunch landed clean, snapping Ethan's head back just before the bell rang. The underdog had not only survived, he had proven he belonged in the fight. As the crowd roared, Jake stood tall, breathing hard, ready for the final round that would decide everything. The final round began with the entire stadium on its feet, roaring in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Jake Miller, the man written off as a janitor out of his depth, had survived 9 brutal rounds with Ethan Cross, the undefeated MMA champion and billionaire. Both fighters were exhausted, their bodies battered, sweat and blood mixing under the glaring lights. Yet there was something different in the air now, respect. Ethan stepped forward with a fierce combination, but his strikes lacked the arrogance of earlier rounds, they carried acknowledgement, almost an invitation. Jake, though barely able to lift his arms, met every blow with the grit of a soldier who had faced far worse. Each step forward was agony, yet each step reminded him why he was there. Across the cage, Emily's voice rang out above the thunderous crowd, "You can do it, Daddy." That single cry gave Jake the surge he needed. With the clock ticking down, Ethan suddenly dropped his guard, leaning close enough for Jake to hear him whisper through the roar, "Show them who you are." Jake's confusion turned instantly into determination. He summoned the last ounce of strength in his weary frame and unleashed a clean, powerful strike, a perfectly timed cross that connected squarely with Ethan's jaw. The champion staggered, then collapsed to the canvas. Gasps swept through the arena as the referee began the count. 1. 2. 3. Ethan made no move to rise. The realization hit the crowd like a wave, the veteran had floored the champion. When the referee's hand hit 10, the stadium erupted. Jake, dazed and trembling, lifted his arms in disbelief as the underdog who no one thought could last a single round had just won the fight of a lifetime. Emily rushed into the cage, tears streaming as she threw her arms around him. "Daddy, you did it," she sobbed. Jake kissed her hair, his own tears mixing with sweat. Ethan, rising slowly with a smile despite defeat, clasped Jake's hand and raised it high. "You earned this," he said, voice steady. "For her." In that moment, Jake realized the true victory wasn't just the $10 million or the headlines, it was the respect he had gained, the future he had secured for Emily, and the reminder that love could turn even the most broken man into a champion.